Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a massive journey to tackle a pretty persistent myth. You know the one, the idea that electric vehicle batteries just up and die quickly, essentially leaving you with this insanely heavy, oversized paperweight. We're going to dismantle that today. We're looking at what really happens when you push an electric powertrain to its absolute literal limits, using real-world data to uncover the truth about EV longevity. Let's get into it. So I want you to think about this. What actually happens to an EV after 400,000 kilometers? That's roughly 250,000 miles for those counting. To find the answer, we aren't just relying on pristine, controlled lab tests. No way. We're combining incredible, real-world microstories from super high-mileage drivers with these massive macro data sets that analyze millions of vehicles. We're going to figure this out together. The 400,000 kilometer club, real-world heroes. Let's look at our first compelling case study. We're heading over to Western Australia, where we've got a 2021 Tesla Model 3 Standard Plus that's been used full-time for Uber ride-sharing. In just a handful of years, this car has clocked a staggering 410,000 kilometers. It's out there on the road every single day, hauling passengers all over the place. And the absolute craziest part? It is still running on its original battery and original motor. Now, what's really interesting about this is the health of that battery after all those punishing kilometers. When the driver took it to an EV specialist to check on a totally minor issue, they pulled the data straight from the battery management system. It revealed a calculated state of health of 90%. Think about that. It has only suffered a 10% degradation over 410,000 kilometers. And it gets even more impressive when you look at the charging habits. Turns out 29% of the total power put into this car came from DC fast charging. You know, rapid charging is something people constantly worry about degrading the battery, but this data illustrates that even under heavy, fast-charging conditions, modern battery packs are incredibly resilient. And hey, it's not just a one-off fluke. Let's see how this builds across different models and continents. Meet Ari Noisenen, a taxi driver over in Finland. He drives a 2014 Tesla Model S. Much like our Australian Uber driver, Ari has taken his vehicle on a grueling 400,000-kilometer journey, but through the harsh, freezing conditions of a Finnish winter. His battery health? It's sitting at an even more impressive 93% remaining capacity. Just 7% degradation after 250,000 miles of rough taxi service. Now, in the spirit of total transparency, we absolutely have to look at the whole picture here. As Ari notes, the major defects he was initially worried about were entirely handled under the manufacturer's guarantee. He did actually have his motor replaced and his battery pack serviced along the way. But here's the thing, it was completely covered under Tesla's 8-year unlimited miles warranty. The core driving range of the battery held up brilliantly over time, and the manufacturers stood behind the hardware when it needed that servicing. Zooming out, the iSeeCar's big data study of 174 million vehicles. Okay, let's dive into this massive data. Because, it's one thing to hear a couple of amazing anecdotes about a taxi or an Uber, but does this actually hold up at scale? To prove these aren't just lucky flukes, we need the big picture. This comprehensive durability study analyzed over 174 million vehicles to see which ones actually have what it takes to reach that 250,000-mile or 400,000-kilometer threshold. When we look at the statistical chance of a vehicle reaching that huge 250,000-mile milestone, legacy giant Toyota leads the pack with a massive 17.8% chance. I mean, they are absolutely legendary for longevity. Now, the global industry average sits way down at 4.8%. But look who's coming in at 6th place overall, Tesla, with a 4.6% chance. They are practically matching the entire industry average. For a company that has only been producing cars in high volume for a tiny fraction of the time of these legacy automakers, this is monumental proof of long-term viability. Putting the data in context. Now, 4.6% might not sound like a huge number compared to Toyota's nearly 18%. But let's really put this into perspective, because the nuances are where the real insights hide. First off, at 4.6%, Tesla outright beats 26 other major brands. We're talking absolute staples of reliability like Subaru and Ford. They completely outclass legacy luxury brands like BMW, Mercedes, and Audi, and they're tied for 6th place overall with General Motors. But here is the absolutely crucial context. The Tesla fleet is incredibly young. The vast majority of these cars were built in just the last 4 to 6 years. A 4-year-old car simply hasn't had the calendar time to physically rack up 250,000 miles yet. So, making this 4.6% figure is actually incredibly strong when you realize it's competing against 20-year-old Toyota platforms that have had decades on the road to hit those numbers. Why do EVs last so long? the structural advantage. So the crucial point we really need to ask is, why do EVs hold up so well in the first place? It really all comes down to the brilliant, elegant simplicity of the electric powertrain. This is the core insight of our explainer today. To really grasp this structural advantage, you just have to compare the high-mileage failure points. Internal combustion engines rely on a crazy number of parts: timing chains, head gaskets, fuel injectors, incredibly complex multi-gear transmissions, exhaust systems, and all of this is operating under intense heat, massive friction, and immense pressure. When those things fail at high mileage, the repair costs often exceed the value of the car itself, leading to terminal failure. Boom, the car is done. Electric vehicles, on the other hand, they were outstanding things like suspension arms, wheel bearings, and bushings. These are easily replaceable, standard wear and tear parts that literally exist on all cars. EVs completely bypass the explosive, high-heat, high-friction engine failures that send traditional cars to the junkyard. The EV maintenance edge. Beyond just avoiding those catastrophic engine failures by eliminating hundreds of moving components, there's also regenerative braking. Because EVs aggressively use the motor to slow down, it vastly extends the life of physical brake pads and rotors. Combine that with modern batteries that are explicitly designed to hold roughly 85% of their capacity over their entire intended lifespan, and suddenly that whole longevity anxiety really starts to fade, just like we saw with our rideshare heroes earlier. The financial punchline, counting the massive savings. Okay, so we know the hardware lasts, but what does this actually mean for your wallet? Let's bring this narrative full circle back to our Australian Uber driver to look at the massive, undeniable financial benefit of this mechanical longevity. $37,000. Let that sink in. That is the estimated refueling savings over 410,000 kilometers when comparing the Uber driver's electric charging costs against a standard petrol car, getting, say, 7 liters per 100 kilometers. By mostly using cheap overnight AC home charging, and yes, even factoring in the cost of that occasional more expensive DC fast charging, the sheer efficiency of the EV powertrain puts roughly 37 grand right back into the driver's pocket. That is a real game changer. And the maintenance cost? Just $130 for new bushes and motor mounts to make it drive like new. Aside from standard consumables like tires and wiper blades, the only major repair that Uber driver actually needed after 410,000 kilometers was to fix a little juddering sound. $130 for some minor suspension fixes? Once swapped out, the car drove exactly like it did on day one. He completely bypassed all that costly internal combustion servicing, like replacing diesel particulate filters or clogged fuel injectors. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive explainer into EV longevity. So, what's our big takeaway here? The persistent myth of the fragile, disposable electric car simply doesn't hold up under scrutiny. The core insight we've unpacked today is that EV longevity is backed by both super relatable real-world stories and undeniably proven by massive macro datasets. I want to explicitly thank you for tuning into this explainer today. Your time is super valuable, and I really hope you're walking away with some solid insights and a much clearer understanding of the incredible engineering behind these vehicles. If an EV can outlast the myths today, what will the data look like when the fleet truly matures? I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. We've just seen that EVs are already matching the industry average for extreme high mileage, all while their fleet is overwhelmingly under 6 years old. So, if a young EV fleet can already outlast the myths today, what on earth is this data going to look like in another 10 years when the fleet actually matures? The automotive landscape is literally shifting right beneath our feet. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the data, and we will see you on the next explainer.